Good. Okay, so we will get rolling now, and I have a very short introduction to do. I will just share my screen just in a moment. Here we go. Welcome to all of you to the Irresistible City Lab. It's the last in a series of webinars that we've been running since the beginning of 2025. We will have one more webinar we plan to do, and then we will actually do something else because it's time to reconsider. But the Irresistible Cities Lab is part of the initiative that was started within the Desire project. And I know that some of you know Desire quite well, but just briefly, in case you don't know about it, Desire was a project funded by the European Union within the European Bauhaus Initiative. And we started up in October 2022, and we concluded in 2024 in the autumn. So it's a bit more than 2-year project. Desire is about designing the irresistible circular society. So the key term when we're talking about Desire is really irresistibility. And we set as a sort of ambition, how can we make the green transformation so attractive that it barely seems like a choice? This was the way we framed irresistibility in our proposal. We've been working in these 2 years with 8 pilots or 8 sites. They have been experimenting and testing and transforming their local project. These 8 sites in 5 different European countries were quite different in size, in scope, and also in maturity. But they were all sort of framed within the Desire project and also, of course, in European Bauhaus framework. And in Desire, we were starting by developing 5 principles that we asked each of these pilots to use as lenses or perspectives that they could work with their transformation through. So put these principles up as a specific lens on how can we transform this site by, for instance, looking at movement, which was one of them, or biodiversity, circularity, aesthetic, and inclusion. I hope I've got them all because belonging. Thank you, Christina. Because as you see, they remind a bit about the net values, and that was also a bit of a confusing point in Desire. What are we talking about when we're talking about the Desire principles? And in New European Bauhaus is talking about values. But at least in our sort of discussion and dialogues we had internally, we saw them as dialogue tools or lenses of perspective that we asked the different sites to work with. And out of it came a lot of learning, a lot of new ways of working with local transformation that was compiled at the very end into a digital learning hub, which is a fancy word, what you could say, for our website. But here we have gathered all the stories, all the tools, all the different publications and learnings that we created. And it's been an ambition to maintain that website and to continue developing it. And the Irresistible Cities Lab was an initiative that we framed to do this together with the community behind Desire, but also beyond. And today we have a Desire community of a bit more than 80 members. 80 people have registered for this initiative, and we have had a webinar for not every month, but at least I think 3 or 4 in the spring and the same in the autumn during 2025. And this is the last version of these webinars where we spent 1.5 hours on sharing, but mostly and more importantly on getting in dialogues with you on your perspectives, because it's not just about information and disseminating what we've been doing, but really reflecting, inspiring, and learning across. Desire was developed as a learning project. A learning environment is what we wanted to create, and this is what we continue to do within this framework. So for today, we are going to hear about the Desire Transformation Guide, which I will not say anything about because Christina Melander and Esther Collin Launberg from the Danish Design Center are here to precisely explain what is that and why are we, why is it for and how is it going to be used. And thank you so much, Christina and Esther, for being here today and share how you developed this compilation of tools, you could say, or approaches, and what it can be used for. So this will be your time to present this. Thereafter, we will have a Q&A and eventually also a breakout session if it gives sense. Otherwise, we'll have reflection. But it's very important that you also get a chance to talk and speak, those who don't have a presentation to make. So I will stop sharing my screen and give the floor to you, Christina and Esther.
Thank you, Åse. Hello, everybody. I'm Christina, and I'm in the same room as Esther. So when I do like this, forgive me. It's because I'm looking at her. So that's why. And we try to keep it only with one mic, so we'll not interfere. And also, hi Francesco, good to see you. I think we haven't seen each other for almost, well, way too long. Okay, so I will share my screen and see how that works. So can you see my screen? Yes. Okay. So before we start, so today it's our pleasure to talk about this Desire Transformation Guide that we developed, I would say, at the end of the Desire project. Esther and I, we are one out of the 24 partners, and our task throughout the Desire projects was to facilitate the co-creation of the Desire Manifesto, the Desire Principles that Åse just mentioned, and also co-creating the Desire Toolbox. So there's a lot of desire things, but just to underline what Åse said before, having the ambition of designing the irresistible circular society, that's quite ambitious, and that's why we saw it as crucial to co-create principles. So what does that actually mean when we say that? And that's why we had this process with all partners where we came up with these 5 principles of circularity, belonging, biodiversity, movement, and aesthetics. And then again, you can say, well, those are just words on paper. So there was, of course, put a lot of effort into saying, you know, if those are principles that needs to be in place in this transformation, how can we transform those principles into sort of research questions that can be applied? And that was basically what each of these 8 sites had to do. And together with that, they use different design tools for that, co-creation workshops, hackathons, sort of exhibitions, a lot of tools that are collected in our Desire Toolbox on the website that Åse just mentioned. And we have, because there are millions of design tools out there. So we put a lot of effort into actually curating the most valuable tools, and not valuable in terms of our opinion, but based on the experience from each site. Having said that, when we sort of, well, not close to the end, but closer to the end of the Desire project, we sort of sensed is maybe a weak word, but that was something missing in terms of tools. That was something that was beyond just having the principles, the research questions, and those tools of how to do co-creation workshops, which were basically, well, we call it the last piece in a triangle, but some themes that seem to be crucial when you are dealing with, in this case, of course, transforming things into this irresistible circular societies, but maybe in any given long-term transformation process. So that's what the Desire Theme Guide is all about, because maybe it's a no-brainer, but as we realized, working with long-term transformation, that is not easy. Let's not lie to each other and say if we have great principles and good tools, then we are all set. But it seems like to be these kind of things that were beyond principles and tools, and the lessons learned. So we identified 6 themes that seem to be sort of, I would say, crucial working with transformation, long-term transformation, that has then become part of this entire learning, digital learning platform that Åse mentioned. So it should be seen sort of the third leg in the triangle, together with the principles and the toolbox. And so these themes are what we believe are extremely useful when you are dealing with any kind of systematic change, where you are also dealing with something that is long-term, multi-level, multi-stakeholder. So, in any case, you can add the word multi, you add complexity. So that's when these themes and this theme guide can be very useful. And also, so these themes that we have identified, it's an additional tool, to be honest. Each of these themes consider of a number of advice, but then again, advices, they can be difficult to apply. So each of those advices have been transformed into what we call, and maybe that's not a good English word, but consideration questions. So questions that should be possible to apply in any given context. So it becomes sort of independent of a context. And then combined with case examples from the Desire project and the specific tools that are maybe uniquely valuable in terms of one of these themes. The 6 themes are well on the website, and in my presentation they are presented in a particular order, but actually they are not. They should not be considered in a particular order, and they are not themes that should be maybe used all the time through our transformation process. But we will argue that they should be considered right from the beginning, whenever that beginning is, to sort of know what are some of those factors that based on our experience from the Desire project will have an influence or an impact at some point in time. And we hope with this transformation guide, that has been the hope from the beginning, that it's possible to sort of do a few shortcuts, and maybe the transformation process is a bit smoother. We are not saying that with this transformation guide, it's going to be a walk in a park. It's never a walk in a park to do long-term transformation in multi-level stakeholders, but we think it can be helpful. So what is it created? As Åse mentioned, we consider her as our learning. But we, of course, as it was a learning project, there was a lot of resources allocated to monitoring and learning in this project in itself. So of course, there was a lot of data created. Also, one of the partners created these narratives of each site, meaning very unique stories of each of the 8 sites in the Desire project. And on top of that, so of course we used all that data, but on top of that, we spent time on interviewing the sites. And it maybe seems a bit banal, but we spent time in the end to really fly up into the helicopter over a good cup of coffee and just saying, looking back, what have been sort of the unique things that you now consider of crucial, and nothing too big and maybe even more important, nothing too small, because this is not in theory, this is in practice. And often it turns out that the devil is in the detail, and those details can turn out to have a tremendous impact. So that's how we went about it. So it's not a big research project. It's a very pragmatic approach that we used. And maybe just to give you a small sense of when I'm saying the devil's in the details. So of course, for each of the 8 sites, we have gathered so many key learnings. And for instance, in Riga, it's a project fostered, the project fostered community ownership through active resident involvement, etc., and was very dependent on the residents to engage. However, those residents, they were quite skeptical and a bit, maybe a bit tired of the city. But nevertheless, the city was very enthusiastic about involving the locals. But what they did to begin with was they reached out to all the residents and invited them to co-creation workshops via social media using Facebook and Instagram. And maybe a bit of surprise, but most of those residents, they were not on social media. So they figured out that the way to engage and lower, the barriers was actually, also a lot of those were senior citizens, was to make handwritten postcards for invitations. And that small thing made a tremendous difference in engaging, because that gesture was really considered as a gesture. And then it was a breaking point in engaging the local citizens. And in Kalundborg, a place in the outskirts of Copenhagen, I guess you can say, in Denmark, again, all these projects were about, engaging multi-stakeholders. So it was industry, it was politicians, policymakers, and of course, locals. And this the project managers of the Desire project here in Kalundborg also found it super difficult to engage local citizens. And because they didn't want to interfere with people throughout work hour, they of course planned all the co-creation workshops after hours. Still not successful, because I think it's fair to say that a lot of the locals in the city that need to be engaged, they are maybe a little bit challenged in terms of finances. So they decided to see if it made a difference, if they could offer the families where they needed the parents to be engaged, to pay for the nanny and to pay for pizza that night, where the parents had to go to co-creation workshops. Again, made a huge difference. It was a turning point to really understand how could they lower the barriers and make it as easy for everybody to take part. So maybe these are 2 very banal examples, but I think for at least for Esther and me, and I guess all in the Desire projects, those were some of the learnings that we found very valuable to highlight, because those are things that you tend to forget because you are so keen on designing the most beautiful co-creation workshop with all the representatives there and have a nice room and how much coffee. And then it's the small thing that people cannot join because they cannot pay the nanny. Well, that, I guess, is something. Okay, so cheers. I just take a glass of water. Or maybe it's a bottle. So we identified 6 themes, which is around how to create trust, to create ownership, to foster and strengthen empathy, how to have high ambitions and be realistic at the same time. It's about inclusion, and of course, it's about learning. And I'm hoping I will not bore you. I'm actually a quite funny person, so but it's if I had to say it myself, and you cannot, Esther. Yes, but I will maybe not go in depth with all of them, but just to give you a sense of what this is. So first one is about, and then I'm saying first one. This is not necessarily the first one, but one out of the 6 in whatever particular in any order is about building and maintaining trust. So what does that mean? Well, as it says here, it's about generating positive stories. I mean, positive stories are something that unites stakeholders. That is something that can create a mutual language. It is something that can shift the mindsets from barriers to possibilities, and to sort of really foster shared pride and purpose in a transformation. So what are some of the positive stories in place from the past? We're so much looking into the future. We are going to change things moving ahead. But what did we come from? What are those stories? Because there's nothing like past stories that can unite us, which is something that really build and maintain trust, and also the trust between people. It's about creating psychological safety, and I know that's the new black in every room I go into now. People are really acknowledging the importance of creating psychological safety. But then again, the question is, what can you really do to make other in the group feel safe? And again, Esther and I, we just talked about it because we haven't really looked into our themes for a long time. But how do you make sure? Because in stakeholder transformation process, there's a lot of power game. You have people who are heading the budget, or who are making the decisions, and then you have citizens, or you have businesses. So this can be a very, very let me say it, interesting space. So really make sure that you have a task here to make everybody in the group feel safe, especially also the one with the money and the power. Because how can they engage in a process where they are allowed to speak freely without feeling that they have promised anything yet? So this is key. It's about building that relationship between people, and understand what kind of activities that can foster friendships. Because if you care for each other, then you are most likely to also be a little bit more maybe open-minded and flexible. So these are questions. And then this was also from Callum Ball in this process, how a good advice: avoid making fast decision, and that you really ensure to have time to explore opportunities. Of course, this is always a balance. At some point in time, you need to make some decisions. If you have questions, you can raise your hand, but I will go through it. And then it's about embrace and enable inclusion. And I think this is something that is really close, to my professional heart. Find the right representation and balance between the types of participants, because somehow co-creation workshops have become the new black, and just because you have 4 people with the same skills in maybe somebody from industry and others from academia, you saw 4 people in a room with a post-it note. That is not what actually embrace inclusion. So this thing about really finding the right balance, but also, of course, the balance between different types of stakeholders. So you do not, I mean, we had a lot of workshops where also maybe young people were a bit underrepresented, which is, of course, it is what it is. But then again, you are a bit. You have a task here to really make sure that you can balance that, and but also really understand who are those actors and which role exists in an impactful ecosystem. So who are all the actors that needs to be in place, who at some point have as something at stake here, whether you are the decision maker or you are the one who this will eventually impact. It's about include the willing and able as well as the unusual suspects. Again, I'm smiling because reading it out, it feels like a no-brainer. But there are always somebody we tend to overlook, but that should be in the room, because they are not the ones, extrovert people like me, raising the hand all the time and say, pick me, pick me. But there is something here to really make sure that nobody is overlooked. And then again, ensure power of the next generation, to make sure that we have that voice represented. And I think that goes for any kind of transformation, whether we are talking, as in this term, urban transformation, or whether we are the huge transformation going on around how we create the future workspace, or how we make young people thrive, or how we create competitiveness in the future. Ensure that the next generation is present, and make sure we are not standing in their way. And of course, here we are talking about circularity, biodiversity, the green transition. Give voice to all, including humans as well as non-humans, and find way that we make sure that we listen to the voices of nature. And that's. And next, so I've changed the design of the slide, because I will not go so much into depth with all of them, but third, and definitely not less important than any of the others, but how to establish and nurture ownership. So this is really understanding that transformation takes time. And because things take time, then it's important to find ways to make the process as tangible and visible. Because, you participate in co-creation workshops, you participate in surveys, you have meetings, you build some thing, and then, you walk home and you think, what happened? So really, as somebody leading this process, think about how you can make output and results throughout the process as tangible and visible as possible. And the sort of low-hanging fruit here is really about, what we saw in sites, exhibit results, building prototype, find ways at maybe the places at the library or in the city hall to start exhibit or things like that, engage on social media, really make sure that, maybe it seems like invisible, and maybe the result will happen in 10 years from now, really, because then you will see the transformation, but how do you then make things visible? And also really think about how you identify the incentives of people involved. And again, if people are different, and people are different, people have different incentives, and the whole thing about that type of stakeholder management and care is crucial to make sure that everybody feel equally important and seen. And the next thing is where it's really where you really see the impact of creating long-term ownership, is where you find ways to make the networks, the local networks, self-sustained. And self-sustained is connected to taking a starting point in different incentives. So when you understand people's incentives, you have a bigger, I think, chance of making things self-sustained. Prioritize empathy and deep care with a place. And I think this is, I will say, architectural design and artistic approaches has sort of been the key in everything we have done, because that was also what was sent out right from the beginning in terms of New European Bauhaus, saying that the green transition is not just an economic exercise, it's a cultural movement, why we need architects, designers, and artists at the core of this transition. But uniquely, I would say that this theme is very related to artistic approaches, and in terms of finding ways to sense places, to not just see, hear, but to really sense, touch, see, hear, feel, because the more you use those senses, the more you connect to a place. And the more you connect to a place, the better sort of it sounds reducing when I say chance there is to be able to envision futures, and this is really about also finding ways how you can engage with the non-humans. So how can we coexist with nature and species, and also prioritize again the local anchoring, because the more you feel a sense of belonging to a place like you do to a family member, the more you have incentives for care, and the more you sort of find ways to balance your personal human needs with the needs of humans. No, sorry, non-humans. And then almost last but not least, the theme around raise and sustain ambitions, and this is I think is not the sort of the easy one, but if we really want to create impactful transformation and not just an ordinary sort of change, but transformation, it is vital to create a joint long-term vision and to co-create that vision where everybody can see themselves. And I think that was also the learning from the Desire project. So even though we were giving a lot of sort of point of departure from the NET project, the New European project in itself, with the value that Åse mentioned, we saw or we believed in the power of co-creating a manifesto within this consortium in Desire, saying that, you know, we have the ambition, we want to design the irresistible circular society, but what does that mean? We had to make sure that we unfolded that ambition in a way where everybody could see themselves and feel it, because that sort of manifesto, along with the principles, they are eventually becoming the steering axe when everything is difficult. And if you do not prioritize unfolding that, I think in long-term processes, you tend to lower sort of the ambition because things become difficult in terms of policy, money, regulations, or just a lack of interest. So I think that's the whole thing, how you really allow yourself to be ambitious, and then at the same time work with what you got. I think you know, sometimes, or well, I hope you agree, but then things can also be so ambitious, so you never get started, because then it requires increased budgets or people you don't have. So how can you balance setting the bar high and at the same time look with what you got so you can get started? Otherwise, we keep sort of pushing things ahead of us. And last but not least, it's the monitor and learn continuously. And we actually had a lot, but potential relatively good budget for the learning mechanism in Desire. But having also been part of millions of other projects, I think the whole learning that we usually call evaluation tends to be sort of the boring thing and something that we do midterm and then at the end. But really, the learning thing is to start with to really understand that you build it in the project and let it become the glue between everything you do, and keep having the mindset about what do we learn and what do we learn about what we learn. Because within those cycles of learning, and that is also where you explore new additional initiatives that needs to be in place, not replace the other things that you are doing, but need to be added in terms of creating bigger synergy, bigger impact, and sort of support the long term. And then I think the thing that is always difficult and not necessarily what you say is found a solution for in this project, but learn from your mistakes and ensure agility. And that's sort of a no-brainer when you say it, but of course sometimes when you are working with projects or things that are public funded, that can be difficult because you promise something and you have very sort of strict, and I say strict in the most heartful way, KPIs. So really think about how can you promise something, but without putting up constraints, way too many constraints to begin with, so you do not have that agility in the long term, because nobody knows from day one how to measure all that impact and embrace all that learning 10 years ahead from us. So yes, everything is on the Digital Learning Hub, aka the website, where you can find these themes, you can find the stories, and you can find all the considerations, so the questions. And now I will keep my mouth shut for a while and let Åse decide whether it's breakout or we should take questions and reflections together. But I have some questions for you. It's a short presentation, but that was a reason why. But some key takeaways, or that's maybe too big, but is there anything that resonate and why? Is there some of these transformation themes that sort of seems more important than others? There's something that tend to be overlooked. And are these themes referable or can be transferred to other contexts? So these are very sort of open questions, but yeah. Should I keep my sharing open so we have this as a awesome?
Yes, I think that's a good idea, Christina, and thank you so much for this going through the transformation themes. It shows clearly that there has been a lot of reflection behind,
Yes.
and I can really advise you to go to the website and look into the different themes, because they contain a lot of questions and also links to concrete tools. But I think
I was about to make a slide from the Miro board that we worked in, just to sort of show you the amount of data, and also just thinking about the process. I'm looking now at Esther, when we sort of had to take all these insights and try to bundle them into themes. It was not easy, but it was very rewarding on the other hand.
I know it's a bit of sort of, what do you call it, juice, ananas known juice, but I've heard from different people that it's quite applicable and accessible, this transformation guide, so therefore potentially also relevant in many other contexts. But yes, let's open the floor. I suggest that we stay in this plenary room, you could say, instead of doing breakout sessions. But then I will invite you to just raise your hand. I'll try to be the moderator of this discussion, if it's okay, and then we just interact now. Yes, thank you, Fiona, for open the dance, please.
Yeah, I'll start, because I know I have to leave soon. So one really practical question, then a much bigger one. But you referenced within the learning one, secure a learning mechanism. That just might be terminology I'm not familiar with, but what does that mean?
The learning mechanism, yeah, but that's a good question. Well, it's to say it a little black and white. It's the new word instead of evaluation.
Okay.
So and when I say learning mechanism instead of just learnings, because I guess why we evaluate something is not just to measure whether we fulfill some KPIs, but it's also to learn for future projects. And I think so it's to put an emphasis on the learning part instead of the evaluating part. Mechanism means that to support that it's something that is integrated right to begin with as a glue, as something that, is joyful, instead of like, okay, we have to also remember, let's have a learning session, but just put it, have it as a mindset that somebody has the job and the task to learn.
Great. And then my much bigger question is, I'm very interested in creating a sense of place within a virtual commons. So bringing people together from different countries in a virtual environment that may share passions for different things, or may share different styles of communication. Do you think these themes are transferable, or is there any of these themes that you would say you would imagine would be the most important in that virtual commons space?
So virtual meaning like in a metaverse you are meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be anything like this, or even more advanced.
Well, I mean, first of all, the whole Desire project was across so many different countries, where lots of not just meetings, but bigger, longer workshops were in virtual universes. Like concretely, we used Miro as like a vision board to operate in, both internally in our team, but definitely also to facilitate workshops, and in the sense of like bringing senses into a virtual world. We used pictures or soundscapes or stuff like that people could sort of put in if that was the purpose of a workshop. So I think the whole project itself is actually facilitated through a virtual universe.
I agree. And also, I think in just thinking about prior to the Desire project, when we were actually going to make the whole application, we started in Denmark, where we identified 150 useful, that sounds wrong, stakeholders. So across industries, academia, young people, politicians, and that was during COVID. So it was in a Zoom call, in a very, very big Miro board. And we actually started by saying, how do you imagine, a climate neutral future in 2050? And that's maybe it's not an easy answer to that question, but there is something that can, in my experience, that can connect people when you move a bit into the future, because there is something about the dream you have for a future where people have more in common that separates them. And it's not so important whether you are academia, or you're from Italy, or you're from Riga, or from Denmark. And that sort of future is something that can unite. And from there, you sort of, if you have a shared dream, you can almost do anything together. Then you can start to agree to disagree.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So what are you going to do? Can I ask you that? I mean, what is it?
Yeah, we have a really amazing project on at the moment, which is opening alongside COP. And it's about really taking all the case studies that are featured on paper or on PowerPoint, and having people actually speak their stories, like be there so you can meet the people who are going through these innovations or these challenges or whatever. But it's a lot, it's creating the sense of trust. That's the big thing that we're facing right now. And it's a whole new approach to it. People are much more used to a place-based event activity than a virtual commons space.
Yes, I agree. And it's two very different things to do. Like when people are doing hybrid conference and they think they can treat people in the room along with people online in the same way. However, I think that what the virtual room can do is it really lowers the possibility for people to join. And I think that in itself is powerful. because it's the easy access. That's what the virtual room can do. I think easier than the physical, especially if you are bringing people in from different countries. Then it doesn't become a matter of budget or time or anything like that.
Thank you.
That sounds exciting.
Thank you, Fiona and Christina. Any other comments or questions? I mean, it's a really chance to get a dialogue on here. Also, it could be your own experiences working with transformation from a very practical, local level.
And if not, we can elaborate.
Yeah, if I put you into breakout rooms, it might have been better, but just please speak. And if you don't, then yeah, Soledad, please.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. This is just a small comment, but I was going to say I thought it was really interesting how you're just talking about the idea of a common future as uniting people, because I think something that I found really interesting from the presentation was your point about generating positive stories also from the past to create relationships between stakeholders. And I think that's sort of a new perspective that I haven't really heard so far, like thinking about this engagement, and very interesting about like rooting in place, which is clearly such an important part of the methodology. You talk about sensing space and doing that through architectural and artistic means as well. But I think this idea of engagement can often feel sometimes like a one-off, but connecting it to these narratives that stretch across time before the engagement and afterwards, and also acknowledging that stewardship has happened before and hopefully will continue even after like involvement stops, is a really beautiful sort of weaving through line.
I agree, and I can say I agree because it's not something that we invented, but we have been working for a long time, and I think that's the whole, future thinking, speculative design, coming up with sort of designing alternative futures so we can start imagine, because as you say, we can't imagine the future, how can we then design for it? So it's been very future oriented, and from that future sort of backcasting to where we are today to understand what we should start. But really this project learned me is really also, but let's not invent the wheel for one say. Let's look into the past, because things always so tend to go like a pendule. Is that the English? Yeah, when I do
Pendulum,
like
yeah.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, but and I really think that, because of course we talk about those images that can help us create a shared language, but the strongest images are images from the past, because that's something we have experienced or seen, and I think that's that has been really something also in a fast-moving world where everything becomes a bit complex at times, to sort of just dwell with, where are we coming from? What felt nice? And maybe things cannot be repeated, but what was that feeling it provided? And as I said to Åse before, or you entered the room, from this project, I mean, I've started to look at my garden differently also. It is, the way I sort of, look at the trees in my garden, just because I got sort of, I learned that, they've been there for a long time, and if they could tell stories, and it made me feel like, connecting to the ones who lived in the house before and things like that. And maybe it becomes a little romantic now, but I don't think we should underestimate the power of those past. And then again, we do not have to invent the wheel if there's something we did cleverly before.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, but it's also about really valuing what is difficult to put specific measures upon. I mean, care, empathy, trust. And in Desire, we learned it somehow the hard way, that we need relationship before task.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to transform or make changes that are big in your local society or where you feel safe, then you start feeling unsafe. So you need to have this kind of safeness in knowing or having a good connections, and relationships are really, really important there to make the transformation happen. But
Yeah.
please speak up. It's not me.
If we want to. It's not a...
Yeah. No, of course. It's not forced. Yeah.
No.
Mariana, please.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Mariana, and I'm calling you from Portugal. And
Where in Portugal?
now I'm in Leiria,
Okay.
and I'm working in an association that works with vulnerable people, social vulnerable, like elderly, some groups of gypsies, people that have stayed living in the street for a long time, and everything that you resume in your presentation, it makes a lot of sense, and I hope I can use it to make like a checklist when I prepared my workshops. But more or less, I have been doing it in a very free way. But the things that is more challenge for me now, maybe you have an answer, is that I'm starting now to build the sense of group between those people. I work with maybe 3 or 4 different groups, and when someone new comes, the more I have been successful in making that sense of group. When someone new arrives, I find out that it's very difficult to put them inside, and it's very usual that I have people that don't come for a long period, and then sometimes they come back. And at the same time, I feel some pressures to show results. So it's very difficult to give the necessary attention for that new member and still be productive. Is there anything that you may suggest me?
Well, I'm trying to think fast here. First of all, it seems like such a valuable job that you are doing. I'm thinking again in terms of sort of power structure here. Your role also in relation to the people who are joining the group, and maybe it is that whenever a new person is coming in, instead of it's you sort of presenting that person, that you could establish some kind of, I don't know what you call it, a body sort of thing where some of the others are having the task to introduce this person. So it's not you, because then you are sort of the facilitator, you are the host, you are the inviter, you have a special role. And then seems like, but what if it's one of the others? And I don't know sort of their capacity to do that, but maybe there are 1 or 2 in your group who could sort of have that assignment, because there's a fine balance, of course, when you have created that trust in a group and you put somebody new in. But if that new person coming in is a way of saying, this is not to challenge the established trust, but this is in terms to make sure it's long-term self-sustained. So you sort of, I don't know, adjust the incentives or understand, all the barriers. But it's just sometimes, because I'm very much aware, we've talked about it all the time, because we are facilitators, that we are, even though we try to be very sweet and very polite and very gentle, but we have power when we walk into the room, and we are the ones who facilitate. So we are also introducing people, new people. It's like we want to introduce them because we think they were missing. And that's the same thing as saying that the group was not good enough or something like that. It's all those psychological things that I believe you know much more about than I do, because you are working in it. But I was just thinking whether it's that you could sort of out-delegate the introduction, or having this sort of body that could help.
And I think also knowing the practicalities of your specific group and project, the thing that Christina also mentioned about the small or minor things that you don't immediately think will make the big difference. So in terms of like meeting people at where they're at and really staying curious to what their incentives for being in such a kind of group or network. So I think especially when you've worked with a group or within a system for a long time, you create your own sort of visions for what such a group does for the individual members, but staying curious to what that new member really is searching for, and meeting them at their place can be both like in the language you use, but also physically, where do we meet them so they don't have to come to us. And I think that's the thing that we worked a lot with in the Desire project. And for the two examples that Christina mentioned, both in the handwritten letters or figuring out, okay, what's keeping them, it's actually the resources for the nanny, and might not have been something that you thought of in the first place. So staying curious to what is actually the
pain point.
Yeah, the small barriers, which really can be individual.
And then coming back to what you said about how do you show the impact that you are creating. I mean, that's the whole, what do we do into the world, introduce the care economy? But we started to talk about, so KPIs is one thing, but what about KBIs, key behavioral indicators? So that's something that we have tried to also experiment with, and something I also have a job where I do a lot of lobby in the EU Commission, and trying to sort of inspire policymakers in that system, say, because the whole what we can start to measure is people behaving differently. How can you measure, that the empowerment of people, or the self-esteem, or those kind of things, and try to it's difficult to put up measures, but in my experience, short-term experience, in that I can see that there is something happens in the ones who are giving us the money's eyes when I use the term key behavioral indicators, because I'm somehow referring to a lingo that they are familiar with, and somehow that they can understand. So it seems like I'm not trying to do something, intangible, feeling stuff, but something that I actually want to see that is crucial in terms of don't get me wrong, hardcore performance indicators. I don't know if it makes sense. Or
I was trying to make connections, but it's not that easy. The whole point of my workshops, it's to keep people entertained, and so they won't be alone. And of course, after that, everything is a win-win. I give them tools, that will be great. But the best is to be together, so they won't be alone all the time at home.
Can I ask something? So in those groups, you say, so of course I understand it's about them not being together and them being entertained, but is it sort of you entertaining them and you giving them the tool? Because I think everybody, even though you are challenged, and we have worked with a lot of challenged people, and but everybody has some kind of talent. and everybody has something they can teach to others. So
yeah, I'm a designer. I'm a product designer.
yeah,
And I've been doing product design with them.
yeah,
So for
Yeah.
me, that's super important. I
Yeah.
cannot just go there to sing. I have to do some design.
No, but I also
Uh,
think in terms of the group in itself, there must be some in that group that can also have some talent. So it's not only you, sort of that transaction between you and them, but maybe.
Yeah, I'm just the start fire, and then they go by
Good.
themselves.
Thank you.
But the rest of you, do you have some comments or ideas or inputs for Mariana? And please chip in.
About your presentation. Well, I would like it to convert in a checklist before every project. Before I started, sometimes I work very alone and I cannot test my ideas.
Mm.
And if I can do a very fast checklist, well, I think that just not for the start, but if I read it all the times before I go to the group, it's important. Yeah. Because I think it's fundamental way to work. And there are a few things that I have to be better. Yeah. Every step that we do. And now I'm starting to work with long-term projects.
Yeah.
And I've tried to fix in the walls what we have been doing. Every session I go back and explain, but yeah, I have to check your list.
Yeah, and I think that's how it can be used as some sort of checklist, and not that you should do everything at the same time, but sort of have it. I mean,
To keep
yeah.
it in mind.
Yeah. It's sort of it's muscles training somehow to keep it in mind and carry it with you. I think it can work like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I could also recommend you, Mariana, to look into the Amsterdam case from Desire, because they work with a local community of many different people, but also vulnerable people who didn't trust each other or the municipality or the facilitators, or at least not all of them. And they were really taking a bottom-up approach and establishing what they call design and do groups, which were groups that citizens themselves created. For instance, a happy group where people wanted to feel or to be together because they wanted happiness in their lives. So they were sitting together once or twice every week and singing and eating and dancing, having a small party. That was the purpose. And then you could say, what is the purpose of this in a transition or a transformation of a sustainable society? Yeah, that could be a question to put. But if people believe in themselves, if they believe in the society, the place where they live, the basis for change is done, and then transformation would potentially become much easier, because they feel a sense of belonging, to refer to one of the desire principles. They feel to have a kind of agency. They can do things. They can do things together with others. They feel trust. They feel empathy. They feel care. So there are these the different themes that you have been presenting, Christina, is definitely something that could support it. But I think it was also an aspect of really looking across or all the way around. And I can definitely get you in contact with the people in Amsterdam if you want to or you can find it on our website if you want to dive into that perspective.
Can you write it down on the chat, please?
Yeah, you
It's
can buy, yeah.
Yeah.
You
Then
can share the
Amsterdam-
link into Amsterdam in the chat. And I think also it's a good reminder of the Amsterdam of the Wildemannsburg case. It's a difficult name of that area, but I really remember visiting that place and just have in those community spaces where they was completely self-sustained. Somebody was growing a vegetable, that was all they were capable of. Somebody else were making a dish, that was all they sort of wanted to do or of what they could do. But as a community, they were all bringing a small piece, and I mean, to see how that place sort of changed, evolved throughout the Desire project. It was already there before the Desire project, so it was not something like that. But when it was put an emphasis into finding those small things where people had what I call a small talent that they could, because I think it's profound in everybody. I mean, we think people would like to receive, but actually people, they would love to give.
Yeah. Those are just
It's becoming very emotional now somehow. I'm like,
I was asking if you
I'm like,
could.
okay, say something funny about money, I think.
I was asking you if you could write on the chat the name of the project.
Yeah.
Was it Amsterdam case?
The Amsterdam case.
I just included in the chat a link to the page that concerns the Amsterdam part of Desire. So you can use that, Marianne, in the chat here. But in case, I mean, Gustav, he also just came up with a comment. One key takeaway for me is your deep dive in listening, reflecting, and slow acting. Focus on the importance on being able to feel and describe the intangible qualities, and by so increase the different values, which is definitely also extremely important about. And this is also, I think, from my perspective, the true value of these webinars, the deep dive into a specific topic and the listening aspect of it. But I will also afterwards, when we have finished this session, I will follow up with an email where I can include the link, Marianne, if you cannot find it right now. So I will include the link to the site.
Yeah, and I think this, instead of my presentation, the link to the transformation.
Yeah,
themes,
also that,
because
definitely.
that's it's all there, and hopefully, I mean, I think. I mean, we put a lot of effort into making those transformation themes and as a tool accessible, understanding that it's people with all sort of capacity or skills, from whether it's public sector, private sector, or whoever is the city transformation maker can access this. So, I mean, language has been a very important thing for us to sort of reduce complexity and make it accessible. So hopefully you will see it like that.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Because otherwise I think we will start to close down or do the last sort of information. Perhaps, Christina, if we could stop sharing your screen.
No, yes, of course.
I think Soledad is
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, I just had a really small sort of comment or thinking about these things just from my own experience. I'm from New York City, and I was working and doing sort of pop-up public engagement across the city, working with community groups. And one project we worked on was about community engagement and developing public spaces in different neighborhoods. And something we had to deal with is we never knew who was showing up at our workshops because we would run them literally on the street. So popping up for 3 hours, random days, and sometimes we had the same people coming and we would be advertising them, but it was kind of designing specifically for the fact that often you have new faces or other people not coming. And something that was a little bit helpful there is, I think, in terms of like workshop spaces, it can be really great to have programming that builds on itself so that people who come back feel that they're learning, but it can also be super accessible if you have programming that is sort of designed so that you can just walk up and participate and then decide whether or not you come again. And that means that people who have come more times can maybe act more like stewards, like Christina was mentioning, or that people who are new don't feel even more alienated from the group. And that's not always possible. And I don't know the specifics of your situation, Mariana, and what you're teaching about product design, but I wonder if that could just be a helpful thought of thinking about like what the content is and how it might help facilitate the inclusion of someone new who might disrupt the group a little, but will not feel as though they are completely out of it because everyone's sort of equal coming to that table on that day together. So I don't know, just a little tidbit from my own experience.
Thank you, Soledad. Mariana,
it's a good point. Sorry.
Mariana?
Yeah.
I was just thanking you. Thanks. The harder part is that the members of my groups are people that lack social abilities. So that's the harder part. But I've been doing a little of it. Yeah.
But I think it's a good point that you are raising, and I'm sort of looking here in my papers on the themes, because one of the things is also that we talked about, if you have a long-term transformation process, it's most likely not the same people from A to B. So people will come in and out, and how do you at one point sort of support the ones who are there from A to B and not feeling that you're slowing them down because new people coming in and out, and not to start all over again, and this is obviously, as you say, a balance, and I think it's somehow it's included. I'm looking at Esther because that is
definitely reflects some of the things in the transformation guide as well, but a really good point.
Yeah, really.
Okay. Any more comments before we will conclude this session? Okay. So I'll just prepare, just a second, I'll share my screen for a few. Oh, something went, because, what am I doing? I'm not doing the right thing here. So here you go. So just what we normally do in these sessions, just look into what comes next. And we have planned one more Irresistible Cities Lab webinar, which will take place, that's at least planned, on November 20th. There it will be sort of a concluding event to see what does this thing we have been going on with for almost 1 year mean, and how can we proceed? Because we cannot do the same all the time, and that reflects perhaps also the issues that you've been raising here. How do you create continuity, but still balance it with a need for innovation? Because you cannot, you need to have both in some sense. So that will be something we'll be working on, and find out what we're going to do for the next year, because we will not be doing this type of repeated webinars next year. But also coming up from a European perspective is the NEP facility calls. There will be a second round in 2026 and 27, and they have drafted the program for these calls. So that could be something we could dive into, because this is also about financing. How can we get funding for the different activities? So far, this activity has been financed, you could say, by Blockshub, where I work in Copenhagen. So the time I spent is part of it, but this cannot continue. So we need to find new ways forward. And how can we keep the community, the dialogues that I think has been very inspiring from these webinars? How can we keep them in the future? That it requires some kind of project format or some other type of format. How can we maintain the community and maintain the interest in the community? So this will be the topic for the future, the next webinar, and also for my next weeks of reflections before we close this year. So this was actually it for this time, just to be specific about what will happen. Well, I have a lot of things to do, so please bear over me with if you don't get the follow-up before next week. It's very busy times right now, but I will share an email with all of you with a link to the recording, and also with the links that we talked about today, the transformation guide, the link to the website, and also, of course, Amsterdam, the Amsterdam part of the Desire website. So you will receive that next week, I hope, but please, I am really, really busy, so it may take a few days before you will have it in your mailbox. But thank you so much to this small but dedicated group of participants. I'm really, and not least, thank you so much to you, Christina and Esther, for really preparing this and taking this dialogue on. It was really interesting. So thank you, and hope to see you some other time. Have a nice day.
And thank you for the good questions and comments.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.